I knew the second I stepped into the banquet hall that I wasn't supposed to be there. No one looked up. No one paused mid-conversation or waved me over. I stood by the door in heels I hadn't worn in years, holding a clutch I didn't even like, watching a room full of people act like I was invisible. My mother caught sight of me first. Her expression flickered, but she didn't smile. Instead, she leaned toward my father and said something I couldn't hear, then turned her back like I was a distant memory she'd rather not remember. I walked in anyway, trying to act like I belonged, even though every cell in my body told me I didn't. It was our high school's 20th reunion, hosted at a sleek downtown hotel with glittering chandeliers and champagne fountains. I didn't expect a red carpet, but I also didn't expect the kind of silence that followed me like a shadow. I passed groups of classmates laughing, hugging, comparing wedding rings and LinkedIn titles. No one stopped to say hi. Not even the people I'd once tutored in AP Calculus or driven home after late-night debate tournaments. My name wasn't on the place cards at any of the center tables. When I asked a staff member, she checked twice, then led me to a half-empty table near the exit, next to the coat racks. The card said Karen Mitchell in plain black letters. No title. No company. No +1. I nodded, thanked her, and sat down. Across the room, the stage was lit up with rotating slideshows of former classmates, baby photos, graduation hats, group shots from pep rallies and proms. Every few minutes, someone new would be introduced. Here's Emily, now a pediatric surgeon in Boston. That's Jason, recently promoted to managing director at Morgan Stanley. They cheered, toasted, laughed like they'd all kept in touch, and the last 20 years had been one long group chat. My brother, of course, had his own section. A full-screen photo of him in a tailored suit, arms crossed in front of a hedge fund logo. Ryan Mitchell, Yale, now CEO of VentureSync Capital. My mother stood nearby, glowing like she was the one who'd made the Forbes list. She pointed at the screen, then at him, telling anyone who'd listen how proud they were. My father just kept nodding, glass of whiskey in hand. Not once did they mention me. I had been the senior class president, National Honor Society, founder of the school's first outreach program. None of that showed up. No photos, no bullet points. It was like I'd never walked those halls, like I hadn't existed at all. I tried to brush it off, told myself maybe it was just a mistake. Maybe someone forgot to upload the files. But deep down, I already knew. This wasn't oversight. It was an omission. And omission, I'd learned, is its own kind of cruelty. When I finally crossed paths with my parents near the dessert table, my mother didn't hug me. She tilted her head slightly and said, "You came, like it was a surprise." My father looked at me, blinked once, and said, "Did you find your seat? Not you look nice or we've missed you. Just logistics. I'm at table 17. I said. He didn't respond. My mother glanced around, waved at someone behind me, and said, "We're over at table 3. If you need anything." Then they both turned and walked away. I stood there for a second, holding a tiny forkful of dry cake, wondering why I even bothered to come. Maybe I wanted to believe something had changed, that time had softened whatever edge I'd apparently carried, that they would look at me and see the woman I'd become. Not the choice I'd made at 19, but nothing had changed. I was still the daughter who didn't follow the plan, who chose the Army over the Ivy League, who traded boardrooms for battlefields and medals no one ever asked about. To them, I was still a disappointment dressed up in pressed slacks and quiet dignity, and I felt it. Not like a slap, but like static low, constant, and impossible to ignore. I returned to my table. The chair was unstable. The centerpiece was missing. Even the tablecloth had a coffee stain near the corner. I sat down, folded my napkins slowly, and watched them toast to futures I was never invited into. It wasn't just the exclusion. It was the certainty with which they delivered it. Like my absence was a footnote. Like I had made myself forgettable. But I hadn't forgotten a thing. Not the way they skipped my name in the graduation program. Not the time they mailed holiday cards with only my brother's photo, and certainly not the way they stopped asking what I did the year I stopped sending updates. I stirred the ice in my untouched drink. Across the room, my mother laughed at something. Head tilted back just enough to let everyone see her pearl earrings. My father leaned into the table, nodding along as Ryan explained something with graphs and numbers. I looked at them and realized something I hadn't wanted to admit until now. They weren't just indifferent. They were deliberate. And I wasn't forgotten. I'd been erased. I was folding my napkin for the third time when Melissa sat down beside me. We hadn't seen each other in years, but she looked at me with that familiar, half-nervous, half-apologetic expression I remembered from middle school. She wasn't there to catch up. She slid her phone across the table. "I thought you should see this." Her voice was soft but steady. I glanced at the screen. The subject line was already enough to make my breath hitch. Removal request, Karen Mitchell. The email was 15 years old. Sent from my father's work address to the school's alumni committee. It was short, painfully formal. The kind of email you write when you want to hurt someone, but still look polite. It read, "Given Karen's decision to discontinue her academic track and pursue alternative employment, we feel her inclusion in the upcoming alumni recognition materials may create confusion about our family's values. Kindly remove her name from all future communications." I read it twice. Then a third time. My fingers went cold. Alternative employment. That was how they described my 20 years in military intelligence. As if I'd taken a temp job at a car wash. As if I hadn't sacrificed anything. They hadn't just chosen to ignore what I'd done. They wanted it erased. Not mentioned. Not associated. Not real. I looked at Melissa. She looked down, then tapped the screen again. "There's more." She swiped to a second email. This one was from my mother. Sent to the Medal of Honor board, it said, "Karen has expressed a preference for privacy and wishes to withdraw her name from consideration. We ask that you respect her request and do not publicize the nomination." I stared at it, my heart dropping. I never wrote that. I never asked for that. I didn't even know I'd been nominated. And now I knew why. It was hard to speak. Not because I had too much to say, but because there was nothing left that would change the truth. They hadn't just shut me out. They had gone out of their way to make sure I stayed in the shadows. Not seen, not celebrated, not remembered. The quiet around me became something else. It wasn't just uncomfortable anymore. It was hostile, decorated with polite lies and champagne smiles. I suddenly understood why I never made it onto the slideshow. Why did no one mention me during the introductions? Why did my name sound strange even to my own parents? It hadn't been an accident. It was a decision, one they made without ever telling me. One of them was made because they were embarrassed. Of me, of my choices, of who I became. I blinked slowly. Melissa said nothing. She didn't have to. There was nothing left to say. The betrayal didn't come with shouting. It came in pixels and professional language. It came wrapped in terms like narrative and family values. It was strategic. Clean. Erasure disguised as etiquette. I thought of the day I told my parents I'd accepted West Point. I was 17, standing in the kitchen, holding the letter like it was gold. My father didn't say anything for a full minute. Then he looked at me and asked, "So you're choosing boots over books," I said. "I'm choosing purpose." He walked away. That's what they'd done every year since. Walked away. From my promotions, from my deployments, from the parts of me that didn't fit their version of success. And now it was here in black and white, a digital paper trail of denial. The sting wasn't in the content. It was in the familiarity. This wasn't new. It was just finally visible. What they said behind closed doors, what they kept out of photo albums, what they whispered when people asked why I wasn't at Thanksgiving. It was all the same story. They weren't proud. They were ashamed. Not of failure, but of silence. Because I hadn't made noise. I hadn't corrected the record. I'd let them carry their version of who I was, and they'd taken that as permission. Melissa reached out, resting her hand near mine. She didn't touch me, just stayed there, as if giving me a way to choose a connection if I wanted it. I didn't move. I wasn't angry yet. That would come later. What I felt now was deeper, heavier. A realization that I'd spent 2 decades trying to earn pride from people who had already decided I was a problem to be managed, not a daughter to be honored. And for the first time, I wondered if maybe they never really saw me at all. The toast came just after the main course. The MC grabbed the mic with the kind of eager grin you only see on someone who peaked in theater class. He lifted his glass and shouted, "Let's hear it for the class of 2003. Some of us went corporate, some creative. Hey, has anyone here become a general?" The room chuckled. It was meant to be light. It wasn't. My father didn't miss a beat. He leaned back in his chair, his voice raised just enough to carry, and said, "If my daughter's a general, then I'm a ballerina." Laughter erupted. A woman near him laughed so hard she had to dab her eyes. Someone added, "Didn't she do, like, a military summer camp or something?" And just like that, it was open season. My mother tilted her head and said, with that rehearsed coolness, "She always had a flair for dramatics, probably still on some base peeling potatoes." I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I sat at my forgotten table, 2 seats away from the exit, and felt the weight of 100 unspoken things pressing down on my spine. No one corrected them. Not one voice said, "Actually, she led missions that don't make the news." Not even Melissa, who still sat a few tables over, could hold my gaze for long. The air in the room shifted. It wasn't just humor anymore. It was a sport. And I was the unarmed target. I could have stood. I could have walked out or raised my voice or thrown a glass. But I didn't. Years of discipline had taught me that silence was safer, that staying still could be a form of armor, even when the grenades were words, and the damage was to reputation. What struck me wasn't just what they said. It was how easily they said it, like it had been rehearsed, like mocking me was as natural as asking for another drink. I watched my father laugh like it didn't cost him anything. I watched my mother sip her wine like dignity was optional. I looked around the room at faces I used to know, people I helped cram for finals, who cried on my shoulder when they didn't get into their first-choice college, people who once told me I inspired them. Now they sat there, amused by the story that I'd become a punchline. My breath stayed steady. My hands remained still in my lap, but inside, something cracked. Not anger. Not yet. Just the realization that being forgotten might have been better than being remembered like this. The DJ switched to a jazz track. The lights dimmed slightly. The MC moved on to some joke about prom night and yearbook photos, but the damage had already been done. The room didn't even know what it had just lost. No one noticed the woman at table 17, whose silence wasn't weakness, but restraint. Who'd seen more in war zones than any of them ever would, behind desks or in boardrooms. They saw a ghost. An afterthought. A good story with a bad ending. They didn't know what they were laughing at. Not really. But soon they would. I didn't go back to the ballroom. Instead, I slipped into the elevator and rode it in silence to the suite I'd booked under a different name. The air in the room was cool. Still, the kind of quiet that felt earned. I kicked off my heels and peeled back the curtain just enough to watch the city flicker. The reunion was still going, though you'd never know it from here. I let myself breathe. Then the phone vibrated. No caller ID. Just a secure ping and a rotating encryption key. I tapped the screen. Merlin escalation. Status 3. Movement detected. Requesting eyes. I read it twice, then turned toward the closet. The case was tucked behind my travel bag, locked beneath a false panel. I placed my hand on the scanner. The click was instant. My thumbprint. Voice. Retina, all confirmed in seconds. Inside was everything they didn't know about me. The uniform was folded with precision. The ID badge. The portable interface. I slid the tablet out and powered it on. The hum of encrypted intel filled the room like a familiar rhythm I hadn't realized I missed. Threats were converging across 3 regions: cyber, naval, and remote drone incursions. One name came up again and again: Merlin. I'd flagged it 6 months ago. Everyone had said it was noise. It wasn't. My hand hovered over the field keyboard. My posture shifted. Shoulders back. Eyes clear. The ache from the reunion faded into something sharper. Purpose. I pulled the secure line. A voice crackled through. Lieutenant General Mitchell, confirmation requested. Immediate presence required in D.C. by O600. Intel is active. You are primary. I responded without hesitation. Confirmed. I folded the uniform once more, but didn't put it on yet. Just stared at it. At the silver stars. I'd earned one operation at a time. I thought about the emails. About the silence. About how easy it had been for them to erase me. But not this. This was real. And right now, someone half a world away was waiting for me to make a decision that could change the shape of what came next. I didn't feel angry anymore, not even wounded. I felt ready. They had no idea who I was. But soon they would. The MC clinked his glass and stepped back into the spotlight with a grin too wide to trust. Now, he said, drawing out the word like a drum roll. Let's raise a toast to the Mitchells, to the proud parents of Ryan Mitchell, Yale graduate, venture capitalist, rising star. The applause swelled fast, like a wave trying to drown out something else. My mother stood first, arms wide like she was accepting a trophy. My father followed, lifting his glass with that smug ease he wore like a tie. Ryan smiled like he'd just won the lottery again, and the MC, not quite done twisting the knife, added, "And let's not forget the other Mitchell child, wherever she ended up." The crowd laughed. It was sharp, mean, thoughtless. Then the floor trembled. It was faint at first, like a truck passing outside. Then came the sound, low, heavy, throbbing. Glasses rattled. Forks paused midair. The lights flickered. Outside, behind the floor-to-ceiling windows, The sky broke open. The helicopter dropped fast and loud, matte black. No logos. Floodlights cut through the ballroom like white fire. The room went from smug to stunned in seconds. People rushed to the windows, phones raised, mouths open. The laughter stopped. The front doors blasted open with a gust of wind so strong it knocked over a centerpiece. Two figures stepped in, uniforms crisp, boots loud, movements exact. One of them was Colonel Reeves. He scanned the room like it was a battlefield. Then his eyes locked on mine, without hesitation. He walked past senators, CEOs, and golden tables. He stopped 3 feet in front of me and saluted. "Lieutenant General Mitchell, ma'am. Pentagon requests your immediate presence." The room froze. The chandelier swayed above us. My mother's smile collapsed. My father's hand shook. The MC dropped his mic. No one spoke. No one breathed. And that's when it happened. A ripple of realization moved across the room like lightning. They didn't just recognize me. They finally saw me. Colonel Reeves stood tall in front of me, voice clear and commanding. "Lieutenant General Karen Mitchell, ma'am, you are requested at the Pentagon immediately. Operational file, Merlin has been escalated. Extraction is authorized." He handed me the sealed folder without breaking eye contact. Gasps broke across the room like falling glass. My name. My rank. Spoken like it mattered. The disbelief spread fast. Chairs scraped. People leaned forward, unsure if they were watching a show or witnessing something irreversible. And then came the voice from the back. A reporter stepped out of the crowd, her hand trembling as she held up a printed document. "I've just received confirmation," she said. "This is an internal email from 2010, sent by Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell to Jefferson High's board, requesting their daughter be removed from the school's honor roll to protect the family's image." The room went still again, but this silence felt different, heavy, exposed. I turned slowly to face my parents. My mother's arms were locked by her sides. My father stared ahead, jaw clenched but saying nothing. I stepped forward. My voice didn't shake. "You didn't just ignore me. You erased me." I held their eyes like a spotlight. "And now, in front of everyone you tried to impress, they'll remember what you tried to hide." My mother opened her mouth. No words came. My father took one step forward. I didn't give him the chance. "You don't get to rewrite this." I said, "Not anymore." Colonel Reeves straightened beside me. "Chopper's ready." "Ma'am?" I nodded. I turned and walked past them both. No pause, no second glance. Past the MC, still frozen beside the dropped mic. Past Ryan, who sat blinking like the world had spun too fast. Past the guests who now whispered not about my failure, but about their silence. At the door, the murmurs turned into a wave, not gossip, but of realization. She's a general. They lied about her. Why would her own parents do that? Some truths don't need to be screamed. They just need a moment loud enough to be heard forever. The lawn was full that morning. Rows of chairs stretched across the grass, filled with uniforms, dignitaries, and the press. The sun hit the flag just right. It moved slowly, like it understood the weight of what was about to happen. I stood at the center, facing the stage. Dress blues pressed, shoes quiet against the platform. A silence settled over the crowd as the president approached. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. He read from the citation, each word steady and full. "For extraordinary leadership, sustained service, and unwavering integrity in operations critical to national security. Then he stepped forward and placed the Medal of Honor around my neck. The ribbon was heavier than I expected, not because of the medal, but because of everything it carried. Not the applause, not the recognition, just the truth, made visible. Somewhere in the third row, I saw them, my parents, sitting side by side. My father's hands were folded tightly. My mother's posture is perfect. They didn't cry. They didn't clap. They just watched. And that was enough. I didn't look at them long. I didn't need to. This moment wasn't for them. It was for the people who serve quietly, who gives everything and never asks for the spotlight. It was for every name that gets left off the list, and every story edited out. After the ceremony, I walked the garden path alone. The plaque on the wall read my name, clean and clear. Karen Mitchell. No titles. No decoration. Just words that mattered, led with quiet strength, served without needing to be seen. Footsteps came from behind. I turned slightly. A cadet, barely 20, stood there. Freckles, nervous hands, shaking voice. "Ma'am," she said, "you're the reason I enlisted." I didn't say much, just nodded once. That was enough. In that moment, I understood something I never had before. Legacy doesn't come from approval, it comes from the truth. And truth, when spoken clearly, can outlast anything, even silence. Maybe my parents never stood for me. Maybe they never will. But someone else just did. And that's what I'll carry forward. What they tried to erase is now carved in bronze, etched in memory, seen. If you've ever felt invisible to the people who should have seen you first, I want you to know something. You're not alone. I lived for years thinking my silence made me strong, but sometimes silence just makes us disappear. There were days I believed being overlooked meant I wasn't enough. Maybe I had to earn a place in the story by doing more, being better. But I've learned it's not about being loud. It's about being real. And if you're still standing after all the quiet rejection, then you already are. So if you've ever been erased, dismissed, or edited out of your own life by people who claim to love you, drop a 1 in the comments. Not for the algorithm, but so others like us know they're not the only ones. That there are others who've felt the sting of being ignored and who are still here. And if you've come out stronger, if you've reclaimed your voice, even in small ways, drop a 2, because someone needs to see that healing is possible, that survival in silence can still lead to something powerful. This space we're building here, it's not about shouting the loudest. It's about being heard. Finally, quietly, clearly, truthfully. Thanks for listening. Really.